Thank you for staying with us on the AM show. Now, the opposition NDC is expected to go to the polls in its parliamentary and presidential primaries. But there has been a spanner thrown in the works because guess what? Team Dr. Kwabena Dufour says, no, we shall not allow you to go through the process because we find some discrepancies as far as the number of delegates that we've been presented with in terms of who is who and in terms of the data essentially that we've been given. They are contesting different aspects of that album that has been presented to them, for which reason they've gone to court. Today, that matter will be heard by the court. We do know that the Director of Legal Affairs at the NDC, Abraham Amaliba, has called their petition frivolous and without any merit. But what is fact, what is fiction, and what is faction? We also want to find out, on the back of these latest events, the Electoral Commission, which was also served by the court, has stayed the process and said it will not participate in the process until it has the green light, until the details that are to be furnished to Team Dufour are, or the matter is rectified. This morning we get into that all-important matter because today we'll find out whether indeed tomorrow or in the subsequent days the NDC can have its parliamentary and presidential primaries. Joining us for this conversation, we have Dr. Alidu Seidu. He's a political scientist at the University of Ghana. We also have Dr. John Osai-Kwapong. He's a CDD fellow, together with Alhaj Inusa Fusaini. He's a former Lands and Natural Resources Minister and a member of the NDC. They all join us for a conversation, starting with Dr. Alidu Seidu. Good morning.
Good morning.
Is that Dr. Seidu?
Yes, please. That's me.
All right. It's a pleasure having you join the conversation, sir. I hope you're well.
Yes, please. I've been doing well. And how about you?
By God's grace, God day we day. Right now, the way the thing catch.
Yeah, we all the manage.
We'll rely on God. But let's start from the very start. Some have said, for example, that as far as the NDC is concerned, this shows some sort of lack of preparation and that the party is not pitching itself properly in terms of election 2024 as that very stable, focused force. But on the other hand, I've listened to the likes of Abraham Amaliba, and he says no. In fact, this has always been the process, that Team Dufour essentially is making a mountain out of a molehill, and that their constitution, per their requirements, there's no such thing as an album, but they must present the list of delegates, which they have done, and this cuts across to all members. In fact, I've heard from the camp of Kojo Bonsu that they are not concerned, that they feel this is the process that must be followed. It is only Team Dufour that is engaging in this. What do you make of the discussion so far, before we get into the fine details?
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, when we say a country is democratic, or the deepening of a country's democratic processes is dependent on internal democratic processes of political parties. So the political actions, behavior, especially electoral processes of political parties, are very important components towards building a national democratic consolidatory processes. It's just when we talk about society, we usually say that society is made up of individuals, and the societal character is the aggregate behavior of individual members within the society. So it's the same thing for democratic consolidation and development. The political parties that are the agents of electoral democratic processes and the key beneficiaries of electoral democratic processes must deepen democracy within their political party jurisdiction. So that's why when we talk about internal democratic processes of political parties, the procedure, how to elect people, allowing people to who to contest and who should not contest, and against whom who should step up for elections and all those things, deepens collectively the national democratic processes and character of a state. And that is why if you read the work of Professor Bratton, he says when he was writing about elections, that three things are key: the quantity of elections, the number of times, and how regular elections are held, is very important in deepening internal democratic process of political parties, but also a state at large. And it is assumed that when we give people ample time, regular intervals to hold their leaders to account, to vote, you are giving them ample time to hold their leaders to account. And that makes their leaders responsible to them. But by doing it in a very regular manner, you learn the art. That's the quality. You master the art of doing it, and you can do it so well, close to perfection, if not perfect. So now NDC has been doing this for several years, and we believe that they are very close to perfection. But it is also a human institution. There are bound to be mistakes, there are bound to be challenges, there are bound to be gaps. And when these challenges and gaps do occur, there are laid down democratic processes of addressing them internally before you escalate it to the level of what? External mechanism.
Do you feel, just to interject, do you feel Team Dufour exhausted the internal processes before embarking on this? Because that is one of the things that have been accusations leveled against them, that they did not exhaust that process, that they went out of certain meetings that were to be held and just ran to the court.
Yes, so that's also the information I'm picking. That first of all, I do not blame Team Dufour for what they are doing. It is part of our deepening our democratic processes, and they have resorted to a legal mechanism of dealing with their grievances. And in a democracy, that is much applauded, whether than resorting to violence or any other means that is undemocratic. But my concern is that a lot of people think they had not exhausted the internal democratic means of addressing their concerns that they raised through the party. And I also picked information that there have been a lot of meetings that were called and they either didn't attend or they walked out, and clearly a lot of people believe that the internal democratic process was not completely exhausted. And what I believe is that NDC as a political party has been there for a very long time. And I think that if people prioritizes the importance and the significance of the party beyond partisan interests, I believe that they will sit down together and be able to work as a family that they are and be able to move these processes forward, because it has a lot of implications, not just financial implications for the planning and the procurement and all the things that has happened, but it also has reputational implications on the party as the dominant opposition party that is ready to grab political power and govern this country. So I still will believe that, even before today, that they will have been able to sit down as a party and be able to exhaust all the internal mechanisms that is required to be able to address this without going up to this level that they have gone to. So I can't read motives into what Team Dufour is doing, but their main argument in public is that there are breaches, there are infractions, and they think that must be corrected. And that is why they have gone to court. I would rather the party had exhausted all the internal mechanisms and not even proceeding to the level that the action that the team has taken. It's a legitimate action, but I still believe that in democracy, one of the key functions of democracy and good governance is compromise and consensus building. And until political parties are able to compromise, especially key individuals who have power, who have interest in leading the party, should be able to make compromises at the time that they think it is very important, make sacrifice sometimes their personal interest for the collective good of the party, to be able to build consensus. And that is where you are held and then seen to be very caring for the party moving forward. But I think after the end of today, the judicial system will decide whether our competent court of jurisdiction will decide whether tomorrow the primaries will come on or it will not come on. But whatever the decision is, a lot of lessons will be learned concerning party action moving forward, but also the individual interests of people who are members of the party.
In terms of what has happened then, so for you, it is not a stab in the back of the party like some have suggested. It is justified, the action of Team Dufour.
Yeah, I think in democratic processes, people will go to court. When you feel that you have been aggrieved, you are not fairly treated, you have the right to go to court. It is a democratic procedure of addressing a grievance. But if you look at the democratic procedure, it is kind of procedural. It's stages, right? And people are, I think a lot of people are blaming him for not exhausting the the internal dispute resolution processes as provided by the NDC as a party, rather than he going to court. Or maybe people are blaming him for going to court. But if you ask me, I think going to court is a democratic procedure of resolving disputes. But I would have rather, as a political scientist, that he had exhausted all the internal laid down mechanisms of addressing disputes in the NDC. If he hadn't done that before proceeding to court. And also, even if he had done that, then people were saying that, oh, this will cause us a lot of damage financially. People have spent money, people have hired people to do a lot of things, a lot of money has been expended, all these things. But also the damage to the reputation of the NDC as a political party. They could have reasoned and then opt for an out-of-court settlement and see how these things could have been addressed, so that a lot of embarrassment and resources that maybe the party is going through will have been saved. So I still think when people come from that angle, they are not also just looking at the legality of the action, but they are also looking at the morality of that particular action and its collective implication on the party that he seeks to lead moving forward into a very crucial election in 2024. It's very important.
Well, Dr. Seidu, thank you for those initial comments. Let me now bring in Dr. John Osai-Kwapong. He's a CDD fellow. Good morning, Doc. Hello, Dr. Kwapong.
Yes, good morning.
It's good to have you join the conversation. You've heard the trajectory on which we've started, and I wanted to find out what Dr. Alidu Seidu's initial thoughts were about this entire process and whether maybe Team Dufour jumped the gun. Democratic right, yes, but like I put to him, the NDC has said this basically was done on its blind side. They had no idea Team Dufour was going to go to court because processes were in place to deal with the situation, remedy what had to be ironed out before D-Day. I don't know, what is your take on same? Do you think Team Dufour jumped the gun? Do you think their action affects the NDC in any way? Are they justified?
So, thank you very much. So, I'm one of I'm one of those people who believe that on some of these issues, if there is a chance and an opportunity to settle it administratively using whatever internal processes an organization has in place. So in this case, the NDC as a political party, if you should try as much as possible to resolve these things internally and not resort to an external mechanism like court, right? For me, going to the courts should be your sort of lender of last resort, right? That when you've exhausted all internal mechanisms and you still believe that your quote unquote grievances or concerns haven't been fully addressed, then you can resort to court. From what I'm reading, and maybe there is a lot more that I'm not privy to, but from what I'm reading and from what I'm hearing from the party leadership, there was still opportunity for that to have been done internally without having to resort to the court. I think the party's chairman, Mr. Senu Ketia, was on air, I think yesterday, talking about how they're still trying to see if they can use internal mechanisms to resolve this, and talking about the challenges in reaching Team Dufour, but they're going to keep trying, even at the same time that the court process is going on. I know they've also, in their response to the suit, is impressing upon the court to dismiss it. Having said all of that, for me, in internal party democracy, in as quote unquote unfortunate as some of these things are, they do happen. The bigger thing for me is you don't want these things and how it is resolved to chip away at the party's unity. Because for me, this is just step one towards a much bigger prize that is at stake for the party, right? The primaries will come and go. What is more important for the party is what happens when is the 2024 election. And for me, it is how you resolve these things that would, unite the party as you go into 2024. So I just hope that whatever the concerns, the grievances, the issues at stake, the party's internal mechanism will be able to fully resolve that to the satisfaction of Team Dufour. I think the court action is unfortunate. I didn't think it had to get to that, but be that as it may, it is where it is. I just hope that the party is able to, resolve that, deal with it, whatever the court decides or does not decide. For me, it is post that and how the party manages that will be key.
Let me take the initial comments of Alhaj Inusaf Hussaini. And of course, he is a former Lands and Natural Resources Minister. He's a key member of the NDC. He joins us via the phone lines. Alhaj Hussaini, a very good morning to you.
Agapo, good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Good to hear from you. What is your take, all of this rancor in your party, the back and forth, and how this has put your party's primaries, parliamentary and presidential, into some turmoil? What do you make of the situation?
So, having listened to Dr. Alidu and Dr. Kwapon, you will understand why conspiracy theories are flying around as regards the motive of Dr. Kufuor or Tim Kufuor in going to court to injunct the processes for electing our parliamentary and presidential candidates for the 2024 election. On my part, I think that what Dr. Dufour's team has done betrays a fundamental lack of understanding of the electoral processes within the NDC. Now, what is happening presently is that the election of the presidential candidate of the NDC is coterminous with the election of the parliamentary candidates. And the process has been decentralized to the extent that in the 275 constituencies in Ghana, the members or delegates of the party will be electing their parliamentary candidates for their various constituencies simultaneously with the presidential candidate. So the delegates that are going to elect the parliamentary candidates are the same delegates that are electing the presidential candidate. Now, I say a fundamental misunderstanding because at the local level, at the constituency level, we have not heard any constituency raise an issue about the delegates who are going to cast their votes to determine who becomes their parliamentary candidate. And these very delegates are those who are to elect the presidential candidate. Now, why haven't they raised an issue? It's simple. The delegates in the NDC system are known. They are not under the armpit of anybody. I mean, they are the branch executives. The branch executive, for the understanding of your listeners, are those executives who man a polling station. Under the NDC's constitution, a branch is coterminous with a polling station. So wherever there is a polling station, there is a branch. And there are 9 executives at that branch. And all the executives are entitled to take part and to cast their votes for their preferred candidate in the parliamentary and presidential primaries. Now, when you aggregate all the executives at the polling level by multiplying 9 by the total number of polling stations which we have in Ghana, you will have an idea of how many branch executives are entitled to participate in the process. The constituency executives are eligible to partake or participate in the election of the parliamentary and presidential candidates, and they do that also at the local level. The regional executives of the party will vote per their constituencies. For instance, in the northern region, if you are from Saboba, but you are a member of the regional executive, on the voting day, you have to travel back to Saboga, to your branch, and cast your vote. And your name will be part of the delegates list of that constituency. The national executives are equally to do same. Under the NDC, all former appointees, that is ministers of state, so Minister Dufour, because he was Minister of Finance under the Atamilton's administration, is entitled, is eligible to vote in this election. Osjo Bonsu, because he was a DC or MCE in the Ashanti region, and also Chief Executive Officer of GOIL, is entitled to partake in the elections and to pass his vote for it. So, you see, by the arrangement in our constitution, you cannot be raising an issue about the delegates. They are known. And ask yourself, before 9th, Dr. Kobnat Dufour and his team were out and about campaigning, appealing to the delegates for vote. Which delegates were they appealing to? His team suggested that they didn't know the delegates that they were appealing to for the purposes of eliciting their support to vote them in the independent primaries. So that is why I see that this action has not been clearly thought through. I totally and completely agree with Dr. Alidu and Dr. Kwapon, where an organization has internal processes for resolving conflict. A duty is imposed on members of the organization to exhaust the internal processes before they resort to external processes. Why? Just like you said, because of the unity and cohesion of the party. Today, a lot of money has been expended on the process. People have been involved in accidents. People have suffered the consequences of having to travel. Some have left their jobs and they are now on campaign trail. The cost will increase if the process is further delayed. And that is why, as a party, if you are going to take an action, you need to look at the global picture, the larger picture. What can you do to further the interests of the party? And to further the interests of the party, you have, first of all, to explore the internal mechanisms that are available to you to solve a problem that you think is connected with the primaries. Not having done that smells or smacks of bad faith.
Right.
And smells of conspiracy. Is it an attempt to frustrate the NDC and the election of the
Is that what you think? What do you think personally? Do you think that is an attempt?
I think that this has not been well thought through.
Let me ask you this: you lament that they jumped the gun, so to speak. They went ahead of themselves and initiated this court process without exhausting the party's mechanisms. But let me walk you through this. They complain about the fact that in the album, and I know the distinction between the list of delegates and the album. Your constitution, your requirements talk about a list of delegates. But the album you presented, they say there are pictures there of males that have, or names that are male that have female pictures there. There are issues. Then let's walk through them one by one and you can give your take. 275 constituency registers are to be given to them. 220 were given when, in fact, you had told them that you had given them 228. Again, there is the talk about the 74,799 voters which could not be verified. There is talk about the fact that upon verification of the data your party presented to Team Dufour, it was found that the number of constituencies on the hard drive was 220, like I mentioned. And they are saying that based on this data, based on the errors, in fact, let me read what they say, quoting them. They say the data establishes basic errors and inaccuracies that render the photo album register inaccurate and unreliable for a free, fair, and transparent, as well as credible election come May the 13th. Can you discount this claim? Because whether they are not in pole position or not is not the question. if they feel that even one vote will be lost, they are justified, aren't they?
Well, they are not in pole position, and I know that they are not in pole position.
No, I'm not saying that they are in pole position. I say while they may not be in pole position.
I also know, I'm just confirming what you said. And I also know that the issues that they have raised are issues that are not fatal to an election. If data has been made available to you, which data says is 228, and by your reckoning and assessment, the data is not 200, it's not accurate, what you do is that you go back to the person who presented the data and draw his attention or her attention to the fact that the statement is not a statement of fact, and that the data is 200 and less than 228, and that can be resolved. Two, some constituencies are not going to hold parliamentary primaries. So are those remaining constituencies part of the constituencies not going to hold parliamentary primaries? What system has been put in place?
But you don't know that. You don't know that for a fact. You're not saying it as a fact. You're asking a question.
Fact, some constituencies are not going to hold parliamentary primaries. As a fact.
No, but the second bit you said, you're asking whether these could be part of some of those delegates coming from such areas. You posed it as a question. You didn't say it as a fact.
I'm just saying that 228 were presented. The list of 228 delegates constituencies were provided to Tim Dufour. And I'm saying, as a matter of fact,
they questioned that. They say it wasn't 228. It was 220.
Well, I said, so they questioned that. They say it was not 228. And I'm saying that issue can be resolved because there was somebody who made the data available. If the data is not accurate, you draw the attention of that person to the data. It's only when you draw the attention of that person to the data and that person refuses to act, then you have a legitimate cause of action to go to court. You have not done that. And I'm saying that I know as a matter of fact that some constituencies are not going to take part in the parliamentary elections because there has been some freeze on the election of a parliamentary aspirant for those constituencies. Now, so it could well be that the number will not be 275. Now, if those constituencies are going to take part in the presidential elections, then arrangements, Dufour should be interested in what arrangements are being made to ensure that delegate list, which is known, is made available to them to partake in presidential elections, because the presidential elections will take off. Now, so for me, as I said, this is a matter that clearly would have been resolved with a recourse to the court, clearly. And not having done that is worrying.
Right.
It's worrying because it affects the unity of the party. It is worrying because it affects the cohesion of the party. It's worrying because as a monolithic whole, we need to approach election 2024 as a united front and not people turning their heads over their shoulders to see who is watching them. And it's important because you don't want to begin to suspect that some people are acting in a way to either scamper or scuttle or sabotage the opportunity available to the party to win the 2024 election.
Let me come to Dr. Alidu Seidu. Now, let's interrogate the data a bit, Doc. Are these inaccuracies or errors cited by Tim Dufour, per your experience, enough to injure the credibility of an election at this level within a party? These dynamics I just read, are they enough to do that? Hello, Dr. Seidu. Dr. Alidu Seidu, if you can hear me, please unmute. Okay, so we do not have Dr. Alidu Seidu. I'll now get Dr. Kwapong to respond to that. For you, what is your take? Dr. Kwapong, what is your take on that, please?
Yes. So, for me, in as unfortunate as it is, I think that the onus is on. The onus is ultimately still on the party and the party's leadership to make sure that this doesn't have a lingering effect on the party as it moves beyond the primary whenever it occurs and it heads into the general election. Because again, for me, my position is always that a political party doesn't want anything that chips away, at the unity of the party as they head into a general election. And so, in as frustrating as this may be for the party leadership and the party and all of that, when it is all resolved, when it is all said and done, they have to keep their eyes on the prize, and they have to make sure that they do whatever it is to still keep the party united going into 2024. And for some of these things too, when you are thinking of an action that goes beyond the party's internal mechanisms, right? You have to weigh, and I'm not saying that some of the concerns, may not be real or, things like that. But I still think that whenever you're thinking of such an action, you also have to weigh the party's interest as well. You also have to weigh, the cost that the party has incurred in trying to, organize this elaborate process, right? I once did a presentation on intra-party democracy, and for the first time, I went through both parties' constitutions, and I was quite amazed to see the elaborate administrative structures and processes that these parties have in place. And it is quite a costly endeavor to maintain these administrative structures and processes and to ensure that it works, which is why for me, you always have to weigh all of these other factors and to ask yourself that this action that I am about to embark on, is it in the best interest of the party vis-a-vis whatever legitimate concerns or grievances that I may have as a candidate in the election? Of course, everybody wants a free and fair process. Everybody wants a transparent process. I am not saying that a candidate should be given preferential treatment over another candidate. No. But when all is said and done, I still maintain my original position, which is in the best interest of the party. You always have to make sure that, or you have to try your possible best to exhaust all internal party mechanisms to resolve these issues.
Let me come to Dr. Seidu. I couldn't hear you earlier, but I believe we have you now. What is your take on that same bit?
Okay, so I think it boils, the claims that they are making boils on what we call election fraud in electoral democracy. And when we are looking at election fraud, we can look at it from two perspectives. What we call the procedural fraud and then the ballot fraud. So I think what they are alleging now basically has to do with procedure. So it's procedural fraud. We have not even gone to voting. So the procedural fraud has to do with respecting laid down mechanisms, procedure, obeying the rules and regulations and all those things that happens before the election day. And the electoral fraud has to do with what happens during the voting, stuffing of ballot, overvoting, and all those things. That has to do with ballot fraud. So the allegations they are making now falls within the domain of procedural fraud. But the issue is, we are looking at procedural fraud or ballot fraud. Basically look at the outcome of that particular fraud. There have never been an election in this country, not Ghana, across the world, which is 100% perfect. We have, because it's a human institution and errors are bound to occur. That is why when we are describing elections, we say it is relatively free, fair, and transparent. We don't say it is free, fair, transparent. We can never have an election that is free, fair, transparent. It is relatively. Maybe in relation to past elections that have been done in the country, or in relation to other elections done elsewhere, or in relation to best practices of conducting elections. So because no election has ever been free, fair, transparent in absolute terms, we look at the implication of the fraud, whether it is ballot or procedural. Is it outcome determinative or is non-outcome determinative? If the fraud that is being alleged is outcome determinative, it means that when nothing is done about it, it has the potential or the propensity to affect the outcome of the elections in favor of another candidate other than the candidate who is alleging. But if it is non-outcome determinative, it may not have an implication. If it is outcome determinative, it may have an implication. Now, we all know, we've been following the polls of what is happening in the NDC. And we all know that the kind of data that we receive from surveys about the presidential election, it is likely going to favor John Dramani Mahama more than the other two candidates who are contesting him. I cannot in statistical terms, say whether those, so if they were looking for 275 and they were given 220 or 228, the other constituency results, even if you add all the other constituency results that were not added to the album and presented to Dr. Dufour, even if you add all those votes to his team, will he still be competitive or he wouldn't be competitive? So when you are looking at the determination...
What do you think on that point? What do you think? From the statistics, from the surveys that have been conducted, what do you think?
I don't have the figures to prove that, but I would still think that even if you do that, it will still be highly unlikely that he will be able to win. That is assumptions. It's not backed by evidence. So by and large, what he is alleging, like my fellow panelists have mentioned, is something that can be addressed internally. Like Honorable Inu Sapuseni said, go back to the one who gave you the data and make it clear to him that it is not up. They can either provide justification and explanation why it's not up, or if that data is available, they provide to you. So if you do not do that, and then you resort to this higher level of injunction,
right,
it has a lot of implications. But I still believe that, per my own conjecture, not based on any evidence, that even if they add all those things to him, it will still be very difficult for him to beat John Mahama in the elections. To me, it is not outcome determinative, even if it is indeed an allegation of fraud.
All right, let me just quickly on this point. You mentioned earlier that, they were justified in embarking on this because if there are errors, it is good in a democratic practice to seek redress in court. But would you still think same, apart from moving away from the fact that they are justified, they have the rights to do it, would you still think same if the court throws out this petition today? In other words, to say it's frivolous, it doesn't have the merit, it doesn't bear the merit needed to stall the process. What then would that mean?
It means that we are deepening our democracy because judicial decisions are precedent. So if they get what they want, it means next time when people feel aggrieved the same way that they have felt today, they will know that the only way to address, so it's all part of what we call constitutionalism, right? So it's about making good use of the Constitution as a guiding document to our lives as people. So the highest form of democratic maturity is what we call habitualization. And habitualization is living by the tenets and the provisions of the Constitution. So if they go and they succeed, it means any other individual in future who faces the same grievances will know that the only way I can address this is to go to court, rather than bring macho men or people to come and vandalize party office and do all those things.
In fact, there will be a precedent they could even rely on and say,
fantastic,
well, this was the ruling then, and so it applies now.
And if there's no merit in it, next time when people go to court with the same kind of frivolous quote and unquote allegations without evidence, and the court throws it. So people also have evidence or precedent to rely on and say that in a similar case between Dr. Dufour and NDC and these people, this was what the court determined. And I think it's the same. So it can become a case or precedent for future rulings. So whichever way you look at it, it deepens our democracy and points to the fact that whenever there's a democratic problem, we should use democratic means to address it, rather than extra judicial mechanisms that drags our democratic consolidation backwards.
Right.
So I think whichever way, it's still a win for our democracy.
Let me come to Dr. Kwapong. Do you foresee that there could be consequences, dire consequences for Dr. Kwabena Dufour in all of this, whether he wins or not? The reason I pose that question on social media, even now, if you go on our live stream, people are saying there are going to be consequences for him, that they feel what he is doing is out of mischief or personal interest against the party's interest. Do you think that there could be consequences for him when the primary does come off?
I think so, right? I think that generally no political party or supporters of a political party wants to perceive or see one of their own as quote unquote trying to ruin it for them, right? Or trying to frustrate a process or trying to do something that may injure the party or may not be in the best interest of the party. And in as much as I've spoken about the onus being on the party leadership to make sure that when all of this is over, these things can be smoothed out. I also think that those who bring these actions against the political party lose a bit of standing, regardless of how right or how strongly they felt about their own grievances and why they decided to take this course of action, that they lose a bit of standing in the eyes of their fellow, political party members. And, people would begin to say, why did you do this? Did you think about the interest of the party? Were you trying? And once that narrative begins to emerge, that you're doing this to hurt the party and becomes the predominant narrative, it becomes very difficult to warm your way back into the party, into the hearts and minds of the party faithful. Which is why, again, I keep saying this is rather unfortunate, and I don't think that this enhances, with all due respect, Dr. Dufour's standing in the party, particularly because this is a party that he's been part of. This is a party that he has served in as a minister. So I would have felt that no matter the concerns that he had, that he would have stopped short of doing anything that would be perceived by the general faithful of the party as trying to hurt the party. And in these things too, these course of actions, when you take them, you also have to ask yourself, how much fodder or how much quote unquote ammunition are you also giving to your political opponents? Because you know that the things you say, the things you do will be seized on by your political opponents as one of the quote unquote weapons that they can use against you in a general election. And so I think that for him personally, he may lose some standing within the party as well.
All right. For you, Alhaj Hussaini, even before I get into the cost to the party, or maybe I should put both of them together, is Dr. Kwabena Dufour putting a nail in his own coffin when it comes to prospects within the NDC with this action? Is that a nail that he has sunk in his own coffin? That's the first bit. And then secondly, what do you foresee this becoming in terms of cost to the NDC? Cost in terms of the image. Do I have Alhaj Hussaini? Okay, I'll try to get him back. I'll rechannel that question to Dr. Ali Duseido, and when I get Alhaj Hussaini back, I'll put that to him. So the first question, whether Dr. Kwabena Dufour has put a nail in his own coffin by going down this road in terms of future prospects with the NDC. And secondly, what do you foresee could be the cost to the party in terms of its image? And then in terms of monetary terms. If they have to go about this and reschedule and all of that, that will come at a cost. What's your take?
So first of all, a political party is a holistic institution made up of individual members who are committed, loyal, and patriotic to the interests of the party. And one thing political parties hate is to see one of their own, whether directly or indirectly or intentional or unintentional, embarking on an action that undermines the collective unity of the party, especially ahead of a crucial election that's going to determine the fate of that election. So there are a lot of NDC supporters who are not happy, even though it's a legitimate action, who are not happy with that particular action. And they believe that if you had so much love for the party and you seek to lead the party and to form a government in the name of the party, you could have sacrificed this action and look internally so that you can find an amicable solution in the name of collective party interest to resolve these disputes rather than what you have done. So assuming his petition is it upheld today or I don't know sure whether that's the right word, is determined in his favor, then it means that the NDC, which is an opposition party struggling to get money, will have to look for a lot of money to be able to bear the cost of what? Extending the processes. Individual aspirants who have committed resources, who have hired the service of people, managers, campaign managers, prompters, and all those things have to extend their contract and pay them. People have already taken leave. People have sacrificed work and have moved to the places that they are going to vote. All those costs, and do they have to go back and come back again, or they have to stay there for how long? All those things have to be factored in. So there is a lot of implications, especially being in opposition where getting funding is very difficult for political activities. So all these things should have been put into perspective and the broader picture considered before such an action is taken. So when people put all these things together, then they tend to doubt his commitment and loyalty to the party. And I wouldn't blame them if people think that way. Moving forward, if this is what people perceive his action to be, and maybe justifiable so, it will have an implication even in these primaries that we're going to have, and his future position and relevance in the party. But not just that, his son is also contesting as a member of parliament in one of the constituencies in the Ashanti region. In political party, you see, it is kind of a generational thing. So you look at the fathers of our current president and what the role they are playing, look at the fathers of our vice president, the role they are playing. You can see it is kind of generational. One particular family takes the lead, and subsequently it's a professional choice influenced by the decision of your parents or grandparents. His son is also coming up. And if people believe that his father's action has actually undermined them or vindicated them or caused them harm, don't you think that he wants to pay back what he has done to them, to his son?
So you feel the consequences could also be borne by his son?
So not just him, maybe his son who is also coming up in the same party. So that's why I agree with Honorable Inu Safuseni that this decision was not well thought through because it has a lot of implications moving forward. So in terms of the cost, financial dimension, it is huge to the party and it will cost them a lot. But as for the finances, it can even be redeemed. I fear an irreparable damage to their image as a political party. This is a party that is in opposition, ready and willing to govern this country when the voters give them the opportunity. People will point to the fact that if you cannot manage your own internal disputes, then how are you prepared to lead this country? And that is a legitimate question. So in this case, they are not looking at the fact that one individual or a couple of individuals, quote and unquote, is holding the party to ransom. They look at the internal dynamics and negotiation and ability to say governance is more about compromise and consensus, but your ability to compromise and build consensus internally will reflect on how you're going to govern this country.
Right.
So people who want to criticize the NDC will go on that tangent.
Okay.
But the idea too is that maybe the NDC has done everything possible as a party, maybe to get him on board and to resolve it in a different manner rather than the approach that is being used. So other people can also argue that maybe it is still the interest of the party and we cannot stop that individual and he has the constitutional right to do what he's doing. But as a party, we still remain resolute, we still remain committed, and we still try and see how we can close the ranks and then the cracks after this and be able to move forward. And in some democracies, things like this will rather strengthen the party, rather than weaken them. It can incite a kind of solidarity, it can incite resoluteness, it can incite party cohesion so that they rally around together and then outcast the person that they think is rather undermining the party. So it can go either way. And I pray that
Dr. Seidu,
is able to manage it in the most positive way.
I think I get the thrust of what you're saying. Right before, we'll be wrapping shortly on the legal dimension today and what your expectations are. But before that, let me give Inu Safuseni just that bite. I lost you when I was posing the question to you about whether Dr. Dufour, through this action, has put a nail in his own coffin in terms of future prospects within the NDC. And secondly, what could be the likely cost to the NDC in terms of image and in terms of real cost, money, if you have to reschedule this primary? Very briefly on that, and I'll take your final words, gentlemen.
For Governor Dufour's fate after this action, you don't need to look far to see that he's destroyed any remote chance that he had to lead the party.
Are you saying that because of this, Dr. Dufour, if he loses, he will never get to lead the party?
Yes, you need to go onto the ground to hear and understand what people are saying. People are simply living. They have been waiting for this time for a very long time. They've been preparing. Since the party lost the election 2020, the party has embarked on a reorganization. We are just at the climax of the reorganization of the party to elect somebody to lead us into the election 2024. And so all the preparations towards 2024 appears to have been put on hold because of a singular action by Dr. Dufour, which could have been resolved. So people are just simply living, okay? And I think that the earlier he got his people, and things don't seem to be gelling. Again, my information is that yesterday there was a spirited attempt by the party to get the matter further abridged to be heard yesterday at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
And Governor Dufour's people said they were not prepared. They were not prepared. And so clearly, is it a time-wasting venture?
All
What
right.
is it intended to achieve?
So your point is made. In terms of today and what is going to happen in court, what are your expectations? A few seconds.
Anything can happen. As a practicing lawyer, anything can happen today. Look, first of all, you must pray that the judge is healthy and can sit. Because if the judge is indisposed, the case is adjourned to another day. If the judge is in court and hears the argument, he can decide to give his ruling today. Or he can decide to tell the court that he's going to give a reasoned ruling. And so adjourns the case to another day. Now, if even the judge gives a ruling today, the Electoral Commission, which is a public institution, is saying that, well, because of this development, we cannot hold ourselves in readiness to supervise your elections. Mind you, we are not saying that they have a mandate to supervise the elections, but we are just saying that it is important that we create a level playing field for all the aspirants and ensure the integrity and credibility of the elections, and also ensure that people who are entitled to vote are those who are voting, so that when we leave the voting grounds, we'll be more united than ever.
All right. And so, per Alhaj Inusaf Hussaini, anything could happen. We could even end up getting a result that is in favor of the NDC. Yet, would the EC be prepared on the back of all that has happened to conduct the elections tomorrow? That is the big question. Final words, Dr. Ali Duseidu and Dr. Kwapong on the same beat, and we're done. I'll start with you, Dr. Ali Duseidu.
I agree with Honorable Inusaf Hussaini that anything can happen. Because it's a chance event based on evidence and how you conduct yourself and a lot of things that you are able to use to support your claims. But I still believe that whichever way it goes, it will deepen our democracy moving forward.
Right. For you, Dr. Kwapong?
It can happen in court. I just hope that this is resolved quickly. When all is said and done, I still put the onus back on the party that they shouldn't let this shake them, weaken their morale, whatever it is that they need to do post this situation, that they should keep one thing in mind. There's an election in 2024, an election they really want to win, and therefore they must do whatever they can to smoothing whatever little fracases may have emerged in the primary process and ensure that they can present a united front going into 2024.
Gentlemen, we're very grateful for your time. Alhaji Inusaf Hussaini, former Lands and Natural Resources Minister, also a key member of the NDC. You just heard Dr. John Osai Kwapong, a CDD fellow, and before him, Dr. Ali Duseidu, political scientist at the University of Ghana. Still to come, we're going to be talking about that World Health Organization report that shows that depression is prevalent among Ghanaians, between 6.7 and 13.6% in Ghana. And interestingly, curiously, troublingly, if you like, worryingly, it is more prevalent among women. We're bringing you that together with our engagements with some of those who have made it through for cues and lyrics. But before I go, so we can have a break, and then Bernice Abubedu Lanza takes over, I'd like to wish a very happy birthday to Thaddeus Sorry, lawyer Thaddeus Sorry. Happy birthday to you, and to Selina Wengham. May God fill your heart with everlasting joy. That is from Paul. So to lawyer Sorry and to Selina Wengham, happy birthday. We take a breather. We'll be back on the AM show.